All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Stefan Schultz's integral journalism model. Today, we're tackling the second principle, bias awareness. Okay, before we get into the weeds, let's just do a super quick recap of what each principle in this whole model is all about.
So, you gotta remember, each principle isn't just one thing. It's really a whole package deal. You've got a practical toolbox with tons of methods, a big picture vision for where society could be heading, a literal superpower embodied by a superhero, how cool is that? And a brand new way for journalists to see themselves in their job. So, you ready? Let's do this.
Okay, so who's our superhero for bias awareness? Let's meet Deconstructor.
Get this, just one question, asked quietly but firmly by a young activist, completely turned the world of a famous debate star named Naveen Calder upside down. See, this guy, Calder, he was a total master of political journalism. I mean, he could spot cognitive distortions in other people from a mile away, but he was completely blind to his own. Think about it. A journalist with, say, a strong free market bias, a neoliberal view, might not even realize they're subconsciously dismissing every point made by a Keynesian economist. It just happens. So that one question from the activist, it just shattered his whole self-image. It led him to become Deconstructor. And his whole story really drives home the point that bias isn't usually some evil, intentional thing. Nope, it's an unconscious process, and that's exactly where this second principle, bias awareness, really comes into play. And as Stefan Schultz puts it, Deconstructor's real superpower is realizing that the biggest fake news are often our own self-deceptions. Wow, that hits hard, right? So that's the what. But what about the how? How do these blind spots, these cognitive distortions, actually take root in our brains? Well, it's really a mix of three key ingredients. First, you've got the basic wiring of our brains, our physiology. Then there's our psychological need to have a stable sense of who we are. And finally, you have all the cultural stories we just soak up from the world around us. And here's the thing, biases aren't just bugs in the system, they're actually features. They serve a real purpose. They help our brains take shortcuts to work faster. They protect our ego and our stable view of the world. And they help us feel connected to our communities by creating these shared worldviews. But, and this is a big but, these handy shortcuts can have some really serious pitfalls, especially in the world of journalism. Here's the real danger. Instead of just perceiving what's out there, we start projecting our own internal maps onto reality. And if you're a journalist with a huge platform, you can accidentally become a megaphone for distorted thinking, just cranking up the volume on all the polarization in society. Okay, so what does this look like in practice? What kinds of biases are we talking about? And what tools does Deconstructor give us to fight back? It's kind of wild. Researchers have found over 200 of these cognitive biases, but Stefan Schultz zeroes in on about 40 that are especially powerful in journalism. Let's just take a quick peek at three of the big ones. Okay, first up, you've got confirmation bias. That's where we just love information that proves we were right all along. Then there's the von Restorff effect, which is why our brains latch onto really unusual or sensational details, often blowing them out of proportion. And finally, the fundamental attribution error. That's when we judge other people's mistakes based on their character, but cut ourselves slack and blame the circumstances. The solution for all of these? It starts with just being aware of them so we can actively push back against those automatic mental habits. But wait, there's more. It goes even deeper than our own individual biases. We also have to deal with collective biases. Schultz calls this the water we swim in. These are the cultural narratives, the big ideas, the ideologies that we don't even notice. We think they're our own thoughts, but really, we're just thinking through the assumptions of our culture. So what's the first tool integral journalism gives us? It's actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Just making ourselves aware of these biases. It's about taking what's unconscious and dragging it out into the light, so we can actually question all those mental and cultural filters. And you can take that awareness to the next level with practices like witness meditation. It sounds complex, but it's really just practicing, observing yourself in the act of observing. You learn to watch your own thoughts and reactions as they happen. So imagine you're interviewing someone you really disagree with. This practice helps you catch that little flash of judgment or that urge to cut them off in the moment. It lets you choose a conscious response instead of just going on autopilot. Okay, wow, that was a super fast tour through some really big, complex concepts. Look, if any of this sparks your interest and you want to really apply these tools in your own work as a journalist, I can't recommend a Stefan's coaching and workshops enough. You can find out more at integral-journalism.org/English. So that was the second principle, bias awareness. And here's the real takeaway. By becoming aware of our inner storytellers, both our personal ones and the bigger cultural ones, we can stop being an unconscious megaphone for bias and instead become a conscious lens for clarity, for accuracy, and for real responsibility.
So, what's next? We're going to meet the third superhero in this model, a journalist whose greatest strength is their heart, the ability to connect with people on a profoundly deep level. Sounds interesting, right? I really hope you'll join me for that one.